So one of the things that I started off with my journey was I've been doing webinars and conference calls for over a decade with what I do in my niche real estate space. And been doing a Monday night webinar. So I started my audience back literally 8 years ago. When I go back to GoToWebinar, was what I first started to use. I saw that my first thing was in 2011. April 2011 is when my membership started there. And basically doing that almost every Monday night to my network and just showing up on a regular basis. I had actually be convinced to do a podcast because I didn't want to do one at first. I thought it'd be too much work and too much hassle. And finally, when my friends told me, no, you can do this, you could do a podcast. And I'd been doing some Facebook Lives. I took words from Kevin Harrington, one of those the guys off the Shark Tank, talking about how you need to be on video, and Facebook Live was just coming out, and I was watching Gary Vaynerchuk do his stuff. I started saying, well, let's start doing a podcast episode every day. Not podcast, but let's do a Facebook Live every day. Let's touch base with our audience because we had a big following. We still do have a big following on Facebook. So that started the journey back in actually November 1st, literally November 1st, 2016. Launched and said, we'll do this on a daily, Monday through Friday, whether it's 8 minutes or an hour long. It's going to be our tribe's opportunity to see what's going on at our business, our company, be a fly on the wall. What are we focused on today? What's our journey today going to be about? What's our biggest thing? And along that 150 episodes at 5-6 months from November through to August, 8 months later, I had a friend of mine, Tom Hazard, basically convinced me that, hey, you need to do a podcast, and it's not that much more difficult than what you're doing. If you're recording the episode, we can take it and run with it. And so that's kind of what led to our starting the podcast, a true official podcast. We're on iTunes and iHeart and all the other 27 or 30 platforms out there, was the fact that we kept rock and rolling. We just kept cranking out content and tried to simplify our production process as easy as possible. All you have to do is record, and then I upload my audio to a platform. I upload the video, usually straight to YouTube, and we just let it run. I don't usually edit too much stuff there. But over time, it's helped us build such a great following of students. And my show is basically half video interviews, and the other half is me teaching. I mean, it's all video first via Zoom like we're doing here, but it's also broken down where, like, hey, however we can reach it, we're going to share it to Facebook. We're going to share it to YouTube. We're going to go back and transcribe the full episode and put it as a blog article. We're going to create infographics for our show and share that across the social medias and Instagram. Now, not every social media platform works for us. I'm not on TikTok. I don't do anything on Pinterest right now. Probably should, because half my audience is women. But what has worked for us initially was Facebook for most people, personal and business profiles. LinkedIn has been a very big game changer for us for the last 24 months because we've really focused on LinkedIn and doing more with that platform, building our network, using some of the connections and the searchability of LinkedIn to go out and find our ideal listeners. So I highly encourage you guys out there, if you've got a show, go to LinkedIn, type in your title or what they're looking for. Like with us, I'll type in real estate investors, or I'll type in note investors, and that leads me to be able to find with people. And then we just connect with those individuals that are in our niche. So that's what the biggest things I can tell you, that's helped out as well. Another niche you may have heard here in the United States, we have meetup groups. I don't know if it's international. I believe it might be. But here locally in the United States, there are meetup clubs, meetup groups, niches of the people that you are probably catering to with your podcast that can be a part of your network. And so we've used meetup groups to go out and find either where I'm speaking in some of our major cities, but also tracking where our audience is at and going to meetup groups in those markets and either looking to speak or looking to add the people that run those big investment clubs, or for us, it's real estate investment clubs, but adding those people to our interview list and then helping them promote the show by sharing an episode. And that's always worked really well for us too. Another thing is leveraging LinkedIn groups and Facebook groups. When you find a big group that serves your niche or your audience avatar, reaching out to the people that run those groups, bringing them on as a guest, or reaching out in some sort of, I won't say joint venture, but kind of the same thing. Hey, how can I help benefit your audience and your group? And all I ask for you to do is share my show. Or can I share my show without coming across as being self-promoted? Because what I'm providing, I think, would be of value to your audience. So I want to open this up, since our speaker's running behind, for Q&A from you guys. For those that are watching it, Jim, Liz, Steven, others out there, I encourage you to ask the questions. What are you doing? If you're trying to do a virtual event, what's your struggles that you're having? If you've got a new podcast, what are some of the things that you're struggling with to make things happen? And I open it up for you guys to be able to ask questions here on International Podcast Day as our speaker is MIA for a little bit. So what questions do you have? What can I answer for you? How can we make your show or your focus better for you? I'm just typing this into the Facebook Live. Had an amazing lineup. We can answer for you. Another thing, guys, out there, a lot of people will just go with audio or they'll just do the video. One of the most important things I have found is when I looked at my numbers for the first year, and I actually did a case study of, okay, what are the number of downloads versus number of videos? Now, my numbers are going to be a little skewed because the fact is I already had a pretty good following on social media. It's already had 30,000 followers follow me on my business page on Facebook from marketing beforehand. So, but when we started uploading videos, we saw more increased audience engagement with video at first because we saw roughly in the first year, we saw 60,000 unique plays on our podcast episodes. We saw over 125,000 views, engagement with our Facebook Live videos. Yes, we went back and tracked it. We had about 100, we had about just under 200 episodes the first year as a full podcast. Not Facebook Live, just Facebook Lives, but true podcast episodes. So we saw that number between the videos. That was about 180,000 engagements compared to roughly about 125,000 unique downloads in our first year. So we did pretty good. We went from 0 to 10,000 monthly downloads by the second month, just because we shared it everywhere. Now, like I said before, if you've been on here, I've got a little bit older listener. 45 to 65 is a lot of my audience, a little bit in the 35s and stuff. So it's not your ideal podcast audience. Usually it's a little bit younger of a podcast audience. So what I did is I got to be other places. I can't just be on the audio. I need to be in the video. The video is already there. I need to do my email blast. I need to share what we're doing. So what do we share? Well, I don't spend a lot of time cutting up videos and slice and dicing. All right. What I do is obviously make sure my video looks good. Okay. We used to record live Zoom calls and then live stream it like we're doing here, but the video would struggle a little bit. So I found I got much better video by simply taking the time to record the episode or video, then restreaming it the next day after a little bit of editing, okay? Let's see here. Stephen asked a question here. This is a really good question. Thank you for asking, Stephen. Do you see any aspects of translating languages coming to increase audience engagement globally? Oh, I love that. I've actually been dealing with this right now, Stephen. I think it's phenomenal. Now, it all depends. I'm willing to bet that your language, primary language, is that English, I guess it would say? I'd be willing to bet. You have to look at where your audience is at. Now, obviously, if you're a podcaster, a big chunk of it obviously comes from the United States if you're here locally. It's going to always probably be domestically located for you. But then looking at the other countries you're in, like I've toyed with the idea, do I need to take the time and bring on somebody to record the episode in Spanish? Or should I take my blog and translate English to Spanish and using that? So, because I've used it in my business when we're reaching out to borrowers, we have English and Spanish, and we're going somewhere. If we have an international borrower, we have to translate the forms into that language. So I would look at simply where your audience is at, what countries, if you're doing and you're getting a big, following in Brazil, well, you probably need to be in Portuguese besides English, or doing both episodes if you can. For the most, or bringing somebody on to at least do the transcription into that language for the most part. So I think it all dependent on what your individual audience is. English and Spanish, we've got some people that speak German. I was just on a podcast out of Austria, and he was in Bangladesh. He's from Austria, and obviously speaks a lot of German. He had to learn German, but he's got a big following in Germany because that's where he started his podcast. So just take a look at the countries that you're in. What's drawing the most? I mean, for me, it would be English and Spanish. We don't see a lot of debt investing outside of the United States. You do see it a little bit in Spain. You do see some of it in Australia and New Zealand a little bit, but it's not the same thing across the pond in England. So it all depends on what your niche is and who's listening to your audience. Now, if you do have Spanish-speaking audience, hey, it might be an extra way to add more value to it if that's something you're targeting. I'll give you an example. We've got a friend of ours who does a, not immunization, she does a, I can't think, not aliens or anything. She based naturalization podcast, helping people become citizens here in the United States. And for her, I would totally believe that it would need to be English and Spanish to help her audience out there, especially those who are listening. So it all depends on what's going on. I mean, you got to realize in some parts of the world, people have more access to this than they do have to a computer for the most part. And these things, what's in our smartphones these days would land the lunar module back in the day when they found the moon. So I think that's a great question Stephen asked out there. I think it's a valid point depending on who's listening to your audience. And like me, if I look at my audience listeners and who's there and who's not listening, I actually have some people in Russia that listen to my podcast. Small amount, small thing. Out of the 130 countries that we're listened in, Russia's a very, very small, less than 1/10 of 1%. I'm not going to convert my show to Russian. Okay, not going to do that. But if you've got a bigger audience, especially Spanish speaking or German or Italy or French, it depends all on what you're doing. Okay, but great question. Thanks for asking that, Stephen. Phenomenal question. Hopefully I answered it to the best of my ability for you. Yeah. In that case, it might make sense to, even if you are doing something, bringing on a co-host or a voiceover expert. If you ever, one of the things, I was in Spain, Barcelona, Spain, 2 summers ago, and we were in Europe for a couple of weeks. And it was when John Wick, the movie, came out. Okay. And we went to the movie theater to watch John Wick, and it was in English, but you had Spanish subtitles. Okay. And that was always the interesting. It's like, well, then maybe I need to duplicate the videos and put it in Spanish subtitles for a Spanish-speaking audience. You might do that, your channel with the English and then another channel in Spanish. Who knows? It all depends on the audience you're doing there for you. So, what other questions would you like to have answered? Liz says, I love Ricky from, yeah, I agree. Ricky was good there. And Liz, I'm going to go back to your question you asked a little bit earlier about how your podcast interviews with thought leaders successfully pursuing their creative passions and publishing, performing, professional or purpose areas. You had your first 3 publishing boot camp ever planned, but had to cancel. Here's the thing. Don't wait to do it online. If you've got your speakers, they understand everybody's had to pivot. And with Zoom and being able to schedule, like what I did with this event, is we had our 20 people, okay, 20 people that said they'd be on. One obviously was on this morning when we started, but MIA right now. But with a schedule, with a Zoom link, that's not hard to do. You use Canva to create infographics for each speaker, depending on how long they're going to speak. If it was a three-day event, yeah, maybe depending on how many people you had RSVP'd, if you had already pre-sold tickets, hey, so I would still do a online event via Zoom. Something is better than nothing for our audience out there. What I would not do is, like, I've got a friend that was going to do a 3-day event in Houston, just as they canceled everything, and they're not going to do anything at all. And I'm like, wait a second, now you've got to refund all this ticket stuff back. Your sponsors, they got to get a refund back for their sponsors. Just turn it into a virtual event online, relatively easy. People will understand. And when we've had huge events, we've actually run 2 Zoom rooms. And like we have a big event called Note Camp every year. And a lot of times we'll have 30, 40 speakers over 2 days. Now they're speaking for an hour. You can't fit 30 speakers into one day, let alone 3 days if you're given an hour. So we actually do 2 Zoom logins. And we basically bought the URL with the registration links with Zoom that you can put in there and say just Note Camp Room 1, Note Camp Room 2. So we just set the schedule. and people speaking, and we had a keynote speaker. We would not have a speaker in room 2 for that hour, where everybody had to go to room 1. And we found roughly about 30 to 40%, depending on the speaker, would flip back and forth. Room 1 was always the heavier attended because they didn't have to go anywhere. Room 2 was lighter, but we also had great people. Those are the replays that were first watched for the most part. So we always like to include the replays. And the fact that what Zoom has going on can be really simple. All I have behind me for the most part is a green screen. Got a good microphone here. I've got a good webcam. Your speakers that are tuning in, you want to make sure they've got good audio and a good video of some sort. Whether they take, I've had to ship a couple webcams out before, worked well. Or we've spent some time with them doing tech checks ahead of time. What you don't want to do is somebody using a laptop camera for the most part. You want to have a Logitech or some sort of plug-in webcam to go on there, because these days laptop webcams just don't really do a good job. It's grainy and it's not the best. It'd be better for them to almost do the video if they didn't have a PowerPoint straight from their laptop camera like this, because the video would be a lot better versus their Mac or their IBM machine here for you. Taking that little extra step, that extra $49 or $99 if you've got to buy a couple, two or three of them, ship them out to some of your speakers, maybe not used to that, that's okay. And then using the slide shares, being able to share the screen and they can bring up their PowerPoints if they got a presentation. People take Q&A from the audience. You can bring people on live, allow them to talk, or allow them to share their camera if they've got a camera to have that kind of intimate thing. Now, one of the things I've done with virtual events is at the end of the day, usually making sure that we put into the schedule 30 to 45 to an hour to bring on people to network. You also have the ability with Zoom, if you want to pay for it, to have breakout rooms where you can put 4, 5, 10, 250 people in a breakout room at some point and have them communicating, network with each other. That helps. It does still not the same thing as breaking bread together, or a happy hour for networking, things like that, but still something is better than nothing these days. And of course, you want to incorporate some sort of after event or pre-event space for your fans, your clients, your attendees to go, whether it's a Facebook group or Basecamp group or something that they can go and connect and keep that momentum going after the event. Now, of course, that requires you to spend time each week, each day, a little bit in that room, in that Facebook group, of allowing people to network, to post, or make it open postings, and just spend a little time. But I find whenever you have a group like that, the more that's going on, the more value that adds. And that's another thing that you can kind of, I hate to say sell, but add as a bonus. Hey, get signed up for our very active group of 200, 2,000, 20,000, whatever it might be. That can be a really great thing as far as connecting. It's one of the things about podcast movement. They've got the largest Facebook group with close to 38, 40,000 people. It's a valuable tool to go to and network with everybody out there. But also your smaller groups don't do wrong. We've got a local meetup group here in Austin, Texas with 500 to 600 members. It's a very valuable group for me to connect with other people locally and see what's going on. So I think the big is good, but also the small intimate comes in really handy, and it works well. One thing we did a while back, we actually set up miniature groups across the country. We did it first through Meetup, through our network. We said, okay, there's a Meetup group here in this city for local note investors to go to. And that worked well. Meetup changed the parameters and shut things down. And I might need to reapproach it with the way that the world is working these days. But then we have also set up specific Facebook groups across the country for specific cities. That has not grown as well as we saw Meetup growing. So we just try to point everybody back into our main group. And then you can assign, if you've got a big following in Houston or a big following in Phoenix, you can always assign a subgroup to meet, or a leader or a coach or somebody in that neck of the woods. So another tip that we have used to really share our show, and this was brought up too, Jesse T, I think mentioned it there, using LinkedIn. LinkedIn is such a valuable tool if you've got people you can connect with. But I like the fact that you can reach out to your listenership. You can also, one of the big things that we have done in the past and we're doing more of, is leaving recommendations for our guests. People that have been on my show, leave them a recommendation. Hey, they were a great guest for our podcast, or vice versa. If I was on somebody else's show, I reach out and leave them a recommendation. Oftentimes it works. They reciprocate that to you, but it's something that they can share, not only on LinkedIn, especially if they got a business profile. And I think a lot of your audience, Liz, would be helpful for that too. Business professionals and entrepreneurs and authors being able to share that almost like mini testimonials that they can use for their book or their marketing. I'm a big proponent. We've got a VA, a virtual assistant, who literally goes on, pulls our reviews off of iTunes and LinkedIn and creates infographics that we share across our social media channels. And it's actually helped people to prime the pump to go on and leave a review of their own in some cases. As always, too, it's if you are interviewing guests, the easier you can make it for people to leave their valuable information in one spot. Calendly is a tool that I've been using for a while now. Love it. When somebody signs up to be either in our podcast or one of our summits, we do ask a lot of questions from them, like, okay, what's your email? Obviously, your email and cell phone are the two most important things besides picking a schedule, but then also what's your favorite social media handle? What's your bio? Do you have a link to your headshot? Is there a lead magnet you're giving away? What's the best social? Do you have an assistant that we need to contact to copy on the emails? Those things help us to have all of our production, kind of our post-production stuff that we need for the speakers or our guests in one spot that I can just go to pull in information from, with especially their bio, short bio. I mean, I can literally just go over to Calendly, pull it up, and have it on the screen as I'm introducing them or talking about them. So that helps out tremendously when you're doing an event, being able to have that. You could even say, hey, what's one or two or three questions that you don't know? What's something interesting you're willing to share? It's really nice what Calendly allows you to post in there, and that can become really kind of creative for you. So we could, but it's a lot easier being able to systemize our marketing and post-production, especially infographics that we use with headshots for the speakers, not only for our podcast, but also when we're sharing to our YouTube channel and creating these images in Canva as well. Question here. You're welcome, Liz. Yeah, that's the thing. Great tip about the recommendations. I think it's great too if you're listening to a podcast episode of somebody you like, go in and leave a recommendation about them. It may help you pop up on the radar. One of the things that we're going to be doing, as we're always looking to be on other podcasts, is another service that we use is called listennotes.com. This is the thing where I can go in and I can pull a list of real estate podcasts, and I can say who's published in the last 6 months, and then I can pay to download all their contact information. Well, going out and finding those hosts on LinkedIn and send a recommendation, and then even mentioning the podcast. Okay. And then one of the things I like to do, if it's somebody I really enjoy and appreciate for listening to their podcast and they make a great host, I do that. And then I'll send them a LinkedIn by saying, hey, I would love to talk about having you on my podcast, or maybe doing a podcast swap. You know, if I were to give them a recommendation, and I don't do this, I'm just giving a generic recommendation, something valuable that they'll be able to use in their marketing. Oh, just say, great episode, great podcast. Can I be on your show? Don't do that. Enough people do that. But sending an invitation, or even taking the extra time to do a short little video. Hey, this is Scott Carson. I'm an avid listener of the Outlier HQ podcast. Love your show, love the events, and I would love to be a part of it someday. But if you're looking for a great podcast on A, B, and C, do this. And then sending that or attaching that as a video, that's something they can use on a regular basis. That's extra, that adds value. It boosts you because now you're getting your audience exposed to maybe new people, but you're also, more importantly, you're in front of other people. So one way to boost your podcast is always to be a guest on other people's podcast. And I don't care if I'm on somebody who's on episode 1 or episode 1,000. I treat it as a valuable audience, because you never know if you're speaking to 10 people now or 1,000 million people. You never know who's going to stick with it, go from there. But it's out there. It becomes a listing post. It becomes something that's a marketing piece for you guys to use on a regular basis. Okay. Right. But getting creative in your marketing, it's all the things that you can do. There's so many different places. Here's the thing that I would tell you to avoid. When you're marketing your podcast, just don't go places, don't waste your time on places that your audience isn't. I don't spend time on TikTok because my audience is not on TikTok. I barely spend any time on Instagram besides reposting images for the most part, because my listenership isn't really on Instagram. We have an older crowd. Now, I do share some things there. And yes, as people get older, they'll transition. I get that. But I'm just simply sharing a little bit. I'm not, Mark did a really good job. Mark Fell briefly talked about how he spent, like an hour on Instagram. Well, his audience, his thing is very visual. When you got 20,000 followers on Instagram, yeah, you want to do that. If you got 2,000, 3,000, well, that's a great start. You would be better off posting to something that's more focused. Facebook groups, meetup groups, LinkedIn, Facebook, or your email list, and get things rocking and rolling. Okay? What other questions, comments, concerns do you guys have? I'm just texting our next guest. There's just a variety of things. And here's the thing, if you're doing a weekly episode or twice a week, one thing people are like, well, I want my downloads to increase. The easiest thing to get your downloads to increase is if you're just doing once a week, go to twice a week. It doesn't have to be a full hour-long episode, or it could be a short teaser episode. I've seen this working for some of our podcasting peers. I do one long episode and then one short 5-10 minute nugget piece. And that keeps, that's increased the downloads aspect of what they're doing to work very effectively and increasing their numbers, but it also gives that short, sweet burst for their listeners that will need to, I got to have my hit a little bit faster for it. Plus, it all leads to opportunities. The more episodes that you have, too, if you're looking to add sponsorships or advertising to it, it gives you a little more opportunities to sell. We do about 20 episodes a week. I'm sorry, not a week, a month. And we've got, 3-4 sponsors that they get an episode each month. So we're targeting them. So a chunk of our content is always going to be around them and how they work with. Now, of course, they're vendors that work very well with our listenership. They add value every week or every month that they're on. But that comes something to think about. Hey, I've got, 20 episodes a month. I'm going to do 4 episodes for you, to smart up. So anyway, that will wrap it up for me talking here as we bring on our next guest. Hey, what's up, Anish? How's it going, bud?
Hey, Scott, I'm doing good. How are you guys?
Great stuff. Give me 1 second and we'll get started with you here. All right.